Greetings, my friends. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Grit and Equity Talks podcast with yours truly, Dr. India White. I'm thrilled to be here with you today. I want to dive right into our show to make sure that we can cover as much content as possible in the set time that I have with you today. And of course, I hope that you're having a winning day, a winning week. So many of us are launching things, so many new announcements, so many great things are taking place. Congratulations to all of you for all of your promotions, your accomplishments, all of the things you're launching, all the things that you're doing. We need more of that. And we'll continue to support and uplift each other. And thank you to those that are truly a part of the tribe that have been supporting me as well. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So now I want to talk with you about a couple of announcements. First things first, the Grit and Equity Talks podcast with Dr. India White will be featured on X Factor EDU, hosted by Matthew Joseph, and it can be found on Spotify. Again, it can be found on Spotify. Check us out. And it's also on the X Factor EDU network. Now, I also want to remind you, I would love for you to keep in touch with me. Follow me on social media. My social media handles are for Facebook is Miss India White. LinkedIn is The India White. Twitter is Indie Speak and Teach. Instagram is Indie238. YouTube is India White 123. And TikTok is Dr. India White. And so with that said, I want to make a new announcement. Of course, I talked with you guys about this before. The Grit Mini Workshop has been launched with Grassroots Workshop. Thank you, Robert Komplinsky and the tribe for that. Check out those workshops. You can go to grassrootsworkshops.com and you can find my workshop on how to harness grit to help students thrive. So it's all about grit and it's all about students. So I also wanted to let you guys know again of some of the upcoming events that I have. I have the Minnesota Council of Teachers of Mathematics. I'll be a featured speaker there next month in April. In Wisconsin, I have an opportunity to do a keynote at the Wisconsin Math Council. Can't wait to connect with all of these amazing rock stars at these events. If you're there and you see me, please give me a hug, talk with me. Let's talk about stuff. Let's talk about grit. Let's talk about life. Let's have a good time. On this podcast, the objective is, are you trying to close the achievement gap, but you're having classroom management issues, or are your students just not motivated to do the work? Then you're going to join me on this wonderful Grit and Equity Talks podcast. And we're going to talk about, some things. So with that said, thank you so much for joining the Grit and Equity Talks podcast. Today's topic, I've had some, educators reaching out to me concerned about some of the things going on, regarding how to really service all students, how to, be fair and how to love on kids, no matter their background, no matter what they're going through, despite all the different things going on, in our nation. And so, that really falls into the category when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so because teachers have concerns and some teachers feel paralyzed and they don't want to get in trouble, they don't want to lose their job, and some teachers just don't really understand what it is, I want to kind of highlight for you some things that I have in mind when it comes down to DEI and how we can move forward. So today we'll be talking about DEI and how we can move forward as educators. First things first, when we're talking about DEI, we have to understand what the definitions are. So first definition of diversity is the practice or the quality of involving or including people from a range of different social and ethnic backgrounds, different genders, sexual orientations, and whatnot. So that's diversity. These all come from dictionary.com, by the way. Equity is the quality of being fair and impartial. And then inclusion is the practice or policy of providing equal access or opportunities and resources for people who might not or who might otherwise be excluded, marginalized, such as those that have physical or intellectual disabilities. So when we're thinking about all this, the words that kind of come to my mind are justice, service, and compassion. Because I think that, at the end of the day, we're trying to make sure all students feel like they're safe, like they belong. And I think that, there's just been a concern as to how do we do that, and how do we keep, academia at the forefront of what we're doing. And I would just have to tell you to continue to love on students, making sure that you're doing your best to serve all students equally and equitably so that their needs are met. And so When I think of this, I think of a couple of times in my class when I was teaching a student who was deaf and hard of hearing. And I remember we needed to find, because she needed an interpreter, because if not, she could not have learned math. She just couldn't have done it. And so I remember we got together and we figured out, how can we get an interpreter in our school, and it worked out very well. I was very happy about that. And I do remember another student who was blind, and he had to use it's almost like one of those virtual devices, like one of those VR, like virtual reality. He had like one of those big things over his eyes so that he can see. And I remember like the paper would be here, and he would have to like put his head like all the way on the paper so that he could see the content, because he really, he had struggled with that. And so, the school, we did what we could to support that child and make sure that he could be successful. I also remember a plethora of times, where students didn't understand, maybe they just had a hard time understanding the content because maybe they're still learning English. If we had to use Google Translate, just whatever we had to do to serve our students was the focus. And I want to encourage everyone and say, let's keep that the focus. Serving our children, and having compassion. And of course, I think another thing was having justice for all students, because that's just the right thing to do. So, how did we do this? What does this look like? Why did we even start this? And I think, with all of the stuff going on, we've got to go back to the beginning, and we've got to figure out what happened to start all of this. So I want to come back to a moment in history that we won't forget. And this is of Dr. King. I watched these things and I was just shocked. I'm just shocked. I want you to notice something in this. These are all like so many Americans running together. It was not just BIPOC community or people of European descent. Everyone was coming together as Americans. So I don't think there was like a lot of labeling. People were really coming together for one common cause. Um, so let's watch this.
It was the evening of April 3rd, 1968, and the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. had just returned to Memphis. For over a year, as president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, he had been planning the Poor People's Campaign, an attempted expansion of the civil rights movement that would include economic and human rights for poor Americans of diverse backgrounds.
So I think this is pretty interesting. It was dealing with poverty and having, I guess, a more equitable distribution for all people. And I think that's what kind of really helped start and initiate the whole DEI process when we're thinking about civil rights movement. So if we think about history, this didn't just come out of anywhere. It came because there was a historical tie to it. So this guy's talking to us.
In Memphis, that struggle was on display. King planned to march with 1,300 mostly black sanitation workers who had gone on strike in February seeking union recognition, dues checkoff, and an increase to their $1.65 to $2.10 an hour wage. Working conditions were hideous. The walkout had been precipitated by the deaths of two workers who had been crushed to death inside their own garbage truck. When King took the pulpit of the Bishop Charles Mason Temple on April 3rd, he sought to rally his supporters for a peaceful march, then scheduled for April 9th. He warned against the violence that had marred a previous protest, lest violence overshadow the justice of the union's cause. Nearing the close of his address, he recurred to his vision of the promised land and of the peace that vision had brought him. This was not the first time King had prophesied his own death, but it would be the last. Less than 24 hours later, at around 6 p.m. on April 4th, King was shot dead on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel where he was staying. Memphis Night editor Doug Stone filed this urgent after confirmation from the police. Nobel laureate Martin Luther King Jr., father of nonviolence in the American Civil Rights Movement, was killed by an assassin's bullet Thursday night. King, 39, was hit in the neck by a bullet as he stood on the balcony of a hotel here. He died less than an hour later in St. Joseph Hospital. The Reverend Jesse Jackson said he and others in the King party were getting ready to go to dinner when the shooting occurred. King was on the second-floor balcony of the motel, Jackson said. He had just bent over. If he had been standing up, he wouldn't have been hit in the face. A shot then rang out. Jackson said the only sound King uttered after that was, "Oh." In Atlanta, Coretta Scott King learned of her husband's death as she waited for a flight to Memphis. Immediately, 2 police cars escorted her home, where she went into seclusion.
So this, I guess this is a reminder as to how far our nation has come since this tragic occurrence and this tragedy that unfortunately people had to go through back in those days. I mean, I was like negative 20 years old, I think. So, but my thing is, I think that kind of set a trajectory for our nation as to how we can move forward so that would not happen again. And not only that would not happen again, but that people actually started listening to what Dr. King wanted and what he was petitioning for. And as a result, so many people have been able, from all backgrounds, to be successful and to find success in the United States. And there was a time where BIPOC communities had to march to attend college. And I believe even women had to march to attend certain colleges and universities. But now look, I mean, you could go to the college of your choice pretty much. I mean, and so we've come very far as a nation. And so I think that this is the focus of how do we continue to move forward. And I would say, to continue to stick together with people who just believe in the common good of all, and people that want to love, people that want to make sure students can be successful to graduate. Unfortunately, poverty, there are, more BIPOC communities that deal with poverty, and they need solutions. They need help. They need support. And so this is why there were DEI programs and things put in place. But now that there has been a shaking for different reasons, how do we continue to move forward to service people? And I will tell you that one thing I would highly recommend is to make sure that you are connecting with students, no matter their background, but to connect with them to make sure that they can be set up for success. Are these students getting the credits they need? Are they aware of different, access to different colleges or, funding opportunities and things like that would help them to be successful? So these are some things that, our students deserve. And the reason why this is kind of tugging at my heart is because I look at the data, I look at the dropout rates. And when you know that there's about 2 million students dropping out of college and, out of high school grades, ages 16 to 24, and these kids are leaving our campuses without a high school diploma or without a college degree, where are they going? How are we going to be able to support all of those families if we don't do something to quickly help them start a business, enroll them in a trade school, enroll them in community college, do something? And what happens is it affects everyone because it affects how we live. It affects, the welfare system. It affects our healthcare. It affects everything, even crime. It affects every area whenever we have students that are falling through the cracks. So the bigger thing here is, how do we move forward as a nation, as a people? I would definitely say, for one, we've got to love each other. We've got to love each other, and we've got to do what is just morally right by humankind. And I think, if the conversation can shift from just being about race or being about all these other factors and just being about the fact that these are other human beings, I think that we'll start to see more compassion, more justice, more love and support as we join together, and help each other so that we can help our nation to be stronger. So I wanted to share some other things that I was looking at regarding like just the impact of, DEI and things like that. Um, and what some different reports have shown. So here's one. It talks about how racially inequitable funding at public four-year colleges and universities, how it's affected students. So it's talking about how more BIPOC or Black, Indigenous people of color are entering into public colleges and universities than before, which is a testament to Dr. King's speech and what he went through. It opened up doors for this to even be a statement. So, I one of my mentors, talked about having to, try to enroll to get in some of the predominantly white institutions, and he was not accepted because he was African American, and certain people also talked about how, back in the day when they tried to enroll, it was not so, various universities were not accepting students of color. And so I'm thankful that, I was able to graduate from the University of Florida um, 3 times. And so times have changed. So how do we continue to move forward, even though things have gotten a little bit sticky? How do we still move forward? And so here they're talking about an analysis. I want to show you guys this analysis that they pulled up. And it says the analysis found that in 2006, BIPOC students accounted for 33% of enrollment in public institutions. Yet by 2018, almost 45% of students identified as BIPOC. And most of these students remain underfunded by the state, local, and federal government. So there's an issue here with funding and students of BIPOC communities, I guess, not having what they need to finish. Or it's unfortunately down here, if you keep reading, it talks about how and while there's been a downward trend in state support, there's been an upward trend in tuition as well as student debt, um, especially for BIPOC students. So if we're trying to close the achievement gap, that's great, but we don't want to also overburden BIPOC communities financially because they don't have the means, they don't have the financial means to finish their degrees. So that was a very interesting article here. It also talks about HBCUs and how the fee revenues for HBCU schools, they jumped by 65%, which is more than double the inflation rate. So it seems like students of BIPOC communities, they need support, they need funding help and things like that. And that is where equitable practices come in. That is where we're able to speak to that on a bigger scale and to say, okay, how can we get together to support these children and these scholars that are trying to, they're trying to do better. They're trying to get a college degree so that they can be productive citizens in society and utilize their gifts in the various parts of the community. There are various grants out there, right? There are various scholarships and supports. And so the next step is, if we're trying to move forward, we have to connect these students with funding opportunities that will root for them, in their respective fields. Are they trying to be an engineer? Are they trying to be, in the STEM fields, medical field? What are they trying to do? Well, who do you know that can help that child? Do you have a mentor? Do you have a donor? Do you have a grant? Do you have a scholarship? How do you connect that child? That's how you can handle that part for financial support. But then I think too that all leaders, not just BIPOC leaders, all leaders need to see how they can do their part as well. Like my mentor, Mama Sharon, I mean, she didn't have to do anything for me. She really didn't. I think she was only, she had only signed up to mentor me for, I want to say for about 4 years. And 4 years has turned into an ongoing, oh my gosh, since 1990, oh my gosh, 1995-ish or something. So over 20 years of her now just being in my life. We talk regularly, whether it's via email or whatnot. And, now that she's, even older, she's turned into more of a mother role. And we've gone through, various conversations about race and things. I mean, she's redhead, blue eyed. So we've had conversations about hair. We've had conversations about food and music, culture. We've had our clashes and we've worked through them. And I love her. Like, like my own mom. She's amazing. And she's like family to me. And it's beyond what we look like. It's beautiful. And I hope that all students will be able to have someone in their corner, like how I had Mama Sharon. And it does not have to always be someone from the BIPOC community. It could be anyone. And I think this is why the focus needs to be on how we can uplift and support everyone in the human race. It should not be to where we are trying to, pull each other apart or hate or pull down, but it should be that we should continue to do our best to have compassion, justice, and love for each other, and to support and uplift each other, like how Mama Sharon did for me. So we see the numbers there, how students of BIPOC communities have been underfunded at times. And if you can lend a hand, lend a hand. If you know someone that can lend a hand, lend a hand. If you have information, provide information. That's a part of the access of being able to help these students so that they can be successful in their role as leaders. So with that said, I think I want to just make a call to all educators, no matter your background and no matter your gender, no matter, just continue to love your students. Continue to do what you can to set them up for success. They deserve it, because this is the next generation. This is the future generation. And we have to be able to help them. And they have to know that we're rooting for them. We're cheering them on. If we can cheer on athletes at an NBA game, or cheer on, someone like Serena Williams at a tennis match, or, just all these great people, Simone Biles, like all these people, then we can cheer on our students that are right here in front of us all day, every day, and let them know that they have an ally in their corner. So, do what you can, do your part to support students so that they know that you're there and that you care for them. I also want to talk about the impact of, and I'm going to share my screen. I want to talk about the impact of college and students, BIPOC communities having access to college. I first want to say that all of this is a tribute to the civil rights movement, to Dr. King, and that we're able to even have these results, guys. So look here, it says a comparatively large share of completions for Black and Hispanic students occur for for-profit sector schools. They took this data from the years 2013 to 2015, and they're talking about how many students are graduating from public four-year institutions versus public two-year institutions and nonprofit four-year institutions. And so they see here that you've got, for a four-year institution, you've got 39% of white students that are graduating from for-profit sector, compared to 30% of Hispanic students and 27% of Black students. Now, we always pull Black, Hispanic, and white for the most part for the main data points, because those are the ones that have been affected the most. Those are the ones that have the most wave effect, the most significance at times. But now I think we need to also start throwing in Asians. I'm surprised that we didn't do Asian student credentials in this as well. But so they've only focused on Black students, Hispanic students, and white students for this particular data set. Then they go to, now this is very interesting. Public two-year or less institutions are pretty even. All of them pretty much are 30%. That's something to look into. What's different about enrollment into public two-year institutions versus public four-year institutions? What's affecting those numbers? And then here for nonprofit four-year institutions, it says that you have 18% of white student credentials, or white students who are graduating from the nonprofit four-year institutions, versus 12.2% of Hispanic students, and then 12.8% of Black students who are able to graduate from these institutions. And then for-profit institutions, you've got 11% of white students. Look at this dramatic change. For-profit, 25% of Hispanic students, and then 28% of Black students. So there's definitely a shifting of the bell curve here when it comes down to Black students being enrolled more so in for-profit institutions than in public institutions. And I think that this is because they just want to get in the door. And sometimes when they're dealing with a for or a nonprofit or more so a public institution, maybe those options aren't as accessible than for-profit institutions. And so let's keep reading here. So it says, while 39% of the degrees and certificates of white students come from public four-year schools, only around 30% of credentials awarded to Black and Hispanic students are from four-year public colleges. A larger fraction of white students' credentials also come from private, nonprofit four-year institutions. Meanwhile, the for-profit space accounts for about 30% of Black and a quarter Hispanic credentials, respectively, while making up just 11% of white credentials. So to emphasize how extreme this difference is, consider that a larger share of credentials for Black graduates comes from for-profit institutions than from public four-year schools. This despite the fact that public four-year schools award twice as many credentials overall as for public schools or for-profit schools, excuse me. So this is very interesting. And then it talks about figure 1 also shows that the slice of higher education sector in which the white students and Black and Hispanic students are equally represented at community colleges. I really wish somebody could give me some data on that. Then they're talking about student spending. It says, while higher spending levels do not necessarily guarantee quality, recent research has established that increased spending has positive effects on both enrollment and completion for the affected students. With the 10% increase in spending, raising the number of degrees awarded by 2% to 9%. So now they're talking about the FTE and all this other stuff. Now look here. Institutions where Black and Hispanic students disproportionately get their credentials spend less per student. Again, institutions where Black and Hispanic students disproportionately get their credentials, they spend less dollars per student. So here you'll see that for Black students, they spend about borderline 10,000. For Hispanic students, they're spending about maybe about 9,750. For white students, they're spending 11,000. It looks like. So that's very okay. I think I'm reading that right. Yeah. So, and that's for the bottom quartile. And then for the top quartile, I guess this is where there's the disparity, because they're saying that for the 50th to 75th percentile of, for instance, white students, they're spending up to 16,000. But then for the top percentile of Hispanic students, 50 to 75th percentile, they're spending only 13, maybe 13.2. And then for Black students, they're spending about 13.7. So basically they're saying that Black and Hispanic students aren't being funded as much. So I would be very interested in seeing what the causes are for that. But not even so much what the causes are. How can we support? There's one thing to say, oh my gosh, there's a problem. But what are we going to do to move forward to make a difference? And so this is why I wanted to come to you today, humbly, with love, just with the reminder as to why we got in this space as educators and as leaders, because we promised that we would do our best to prepare the future generation, prepare students for life, to prepare students no matter what their ailments are, to help them work through those hard moments in their lives. And I just hope that we can all continue to do the same, continue to love students, continue to move forward, no matter what is going on, but just to continue to do what's right in your heart so that not only can you sleep at night, but that our students can have a true model for success. So thank you so much for sticking with me. Thank you for listening here again on the Grit and Equity podcast with Dr. India White. Again, I'm going to give you my information so that you can follow me and we can be in touch. So first things first, my Facebook is Miss India White. LinkedIn is the India White. Twitter is Indy Speak and Teach. Instagram is Indy238. YouTube is India White 123, and TikTok is Dr. India White. So I hope that you can follow me there. Also, please don't forget to check out the mini grit workshop on grassroots workshops with Robert Kaplinski and the tribe. And in addition to that, this podcast will be featured on the X Factor EDU network with Dr. Matthew Joseph, and it can be found on Spotify. Some of you have been reaching out about getting a part, being a part of the podcast. So if you're wanting to be a part, please schedule a consultation with me so we can get you in. I need a photo of you. I need your bio, and you can send it to india.white.123@gmail.com. Also, we are always looking for sponsors. So if you're willing to sponsor, you've got a little extra, funding where you could support us in this movement, we would love to have you come on board and to work with us. And also, I wanted to remind you guys, upcoming events. I've got the Minnesota Council of Teachers of Mathematics, where I'll be a featured speaker, and the Wisconsin Math Council in April or in May. So I hope to see you guys there. Again, thank you so much for joining me on the Grit and Equity Talks podcast. And until next time, stay gritty. Take care.